commands all the time, when protect yourselves all the time. If you got any questions, don't touch gloves.
It's been the big narrative for...
Here comes the return of the legendary Colby Covington. For a long time he disappeared. We did not hear almost anything about him. But recently he volunteered to ensure one of the title fights while no one knew about it. And after this event, Dana White promised the American a title fight against Leon Edwards. Hello fighters, with you channel MMA predictions. In this video, I will give a prediction for the expected fight between Leon Edwards and Colby Covington. But before starting this video, do not forget to subscribe to the channel and like it so that as many fans as possible can see this release. Let's remember Colby's original path so that we can at least have an idea of what awaits him next. He started in the main promotion of the world as an ordinary nondescript fighter. He won confidently, but not quite spectacularly, and due to this minus, the wanted UFC to get rid of him, although he was on a winning streak. But as we can see, the main promotion of the world is primarily business, and only then the sports component. Covington bought what they needed in time, and at one Brazilian tournament spoke harshly about the fans of Brazil and in general about their nature. Thereby there was a lot of hype in the circle of his name, and of course, there was no question of any dismissal, at least for that period of time. He began to get where worthwhile fights he was, since now he was interesting as a fan. They watched with the hope that he would lose every fight, thereby making a big deal of revenue with the tournament of his participation. So he was able to win the interim welterweight belt by destroying Rafael dos Anjos in each of the rounds, but due to his long absence, he was deprived of the belt and he had to fight with the veteran of this sport, Robbie Lawler, whom he also incinerated and defeated by unanimous decision. After he achieved what he wanted, the company gave him a title fight in which, alas, he lost by knockout at the end of the 5th round. About half a year has passed, and he goes to his next fight against Tyron Woodley, who has surrendered his position, wins by technical knockout due to an injury to the American, and again goes to the title fight against Kamaru, and loses again, only now by decision. And just a year ago, he went to fight against his former friend Jorge Masvidal, which he was also able to defeat by decision, though not without problems. But in the end, Colby turned out to be the winners. And this is where his professional fights end, and the adventures begin on the street. I think you have all already heard that Masvidal watched Colby and prescribed him a couple of accurate blows to the face. And naturally, Covington wrote a statement. So far, things have gone into a stupor, but Colby will soon enter the octagon to try to win the welterweight title for the 3rd time. And we will smoothly move on to the analysis of this fight. Who will be stronger? Will Colby's fight work? Now we'll find it all out. Percussive style. Well, the first thing we'll start with is the punch, and next in line is Leon. From a few of his fights, I realized something. In fights against wrestlers, he is so focused on translations that he forgets to work properly on the top floor. Due to this, it seems to me that we saw the superiority of Kamaru over Edwards in the rack. Leon was so strong, but worried about the translations that he clamped himself to the cage and kept his hands closer to his legs, due to which Usman hit with his blows. So it was in the first and second fights, and therefore I can calmly say this. In battles against people who do not have a struggle, Edwards showed himself much better. Watch the same fight against Diaz, where Leon showed his entire arsenal of blows. There was almost everything. Edwards did not deny himself anything. And in the battle against Kamaru, the Briton was too constrained and limited himself in attacks. For a moment, Colby has a similar style as Usman, and if he uses a similar plan, that's all for Leon Khan. Now let's move on to Colby Covington's percussion skills, and we will clearly have something to talk about. As we know, Colby is a basic wrestler, but if he needs to, then he can easily box. A good example of this is the fight against Robbie Lawler. In that fight, we first saw that Covington knows how not only to fight, but also to competently fight on his own. And if you look closely at his fight, it becomes clear that he does not have a goal to knock out. First of all, the fact of striking is important for him. He takes not at the expense of strength, but at the expense of tonnage, and thus in the rack he interrupts his counterpart 2 or even 3 times. But lately his jaw has begun to fail. A total of 3 times he fell in battles against Kamaru Usman. Also, a punched fighter in the person of Jorge Masvidal was able to put an American on the 5th point. And this tells us that if the Briton hits well, then Colby is likely to fall. In terms of favorite, I will still choose Edwards. Due to its versatility, it will look preferable to the applicant. Playing from below. Then according to the plan we have a fight, and this time we will start with the champion Leon Edwards. Well, what can be said about his struggle? I think that for 2 consecutive training camps to Kamaru Usman, he clearly did not go just like that. He honed his defense against transfers and all sorts of things like coups. In the first fight, as we remember, Edwards seemed to be not his own. He looked in the stance in any way, and he did not show anything in the fight. But in the second fight, he corrected all the mistakes that were and no longer allowed himself to be translated. Of course, there were episodes where Usman translated Edwards, but this time it was much less common, and Leon got up almost instantly. I think he will also treat the fight against Colby with full responsibility and will not allow himself to be transferred just like that. Leon has good protection against transfers, and since Kamaru had problems, Covington will have 100% of them. So now let's move on to Colby's fight, and here he can be said to be like a fish in water. All his fights are like a carbon copy, a couple of minutes in the rack, and then a series of unanswered translations. Why do I say series? Everything is simple Colby translates, but he never managed to keep his opponent, Rafael dos Anjos, Jorge Masvidal, and even Tyron Woodley Rose from under the American, and therefore Colby takes at the expense of quantity. With such a style, he can exhaust the Briton and calmly control him. I do not assure that this will happen, but the similar style that Colby has, it will not be easy for Edwards to adjust, and therefore I will choose Colby Covington as the favorite, who has been in this area for a long time, and he clearly has enough strength to translate the drummer. Cardio spirit. What can be said about Colby's stamina? I can say with full confidence that the American has the best cardio in all of UFC. He can go out and destroy his opponents for at least 10 rounds. He fights at the highest pace, and I didn't even notice a hint of fatigue in his fights. He always rushes forward and achieves his goal. As for the Briton's gas tank, he will clearly be inferior to the American in this aspect. But not to say that Colby will breathe it directly. Edwards had his moments in his career where he showed that his cardio is also at a high level. But still, I will choose Colby Covington as a favorite. Due to his natural giftedness, he will look better exactly. As for the spirit, I'll believe in Colby, who always goes in front no matter what. Forecast. I think that in this fight, Colby will take the victory by decision of the judges. He will miss the fight with the punch, and due to this, Edwards will always get confused and miss extra punches that will lead to defeat. The future of fighters. As for Colby's future, after winning the title, he will be attacked by a bunch of hungry contenders, including Kamaru, and Edwards will continue to conquer welterweight tops, but not to say that he is a dream, but to get closer to the title picture.